Most plays about this subject are very sad, and most stories about this are heartbreaking. This endeavors to lift your heart up a bit, not just break it. And I think that's really, now that I think of it, that is what attracted me to this. This was a story about dementia that didn't break my heart. It actually made it grow a little bit. And I don't know, I think that's a rare thing.
So we are having an amazing talk back on June the 26th, which brings together all the things that this play touches on. And we are so amazingly lucky. We have people from the absolute top flight of both the science and the creativity fields to talk about this. So we have Dr. Bruce Miller, who runs the Memory and Aging Center in UC San Francisco, who is really one of the premier neurologists in the world, but has this particular interest in looking at the brain and creativity and how they work together, and even almost looking at creativity as maybe a way of treating the brain or helping the brain in extremis. And then on the other side, we have this extraordinary opportunity to meet David Milch, who is the creator of Deadwood, all of these amazing shows. Now, he is suffering from Alzheimer's, and he made the incredibly brave decision to, instead of hiding it and trying to keep it from people, he decided to talk about it publicly. And he, in fact, did the whole last series of Deadwood while suffering from Alzheimer's. Now, he is now cared for by his wife, and he's in quite advanced stage Alzheimer's. And he is still prepared to come on. And the one thing that lights him up, that makes him unbelievably connected and back in the reality of now, is telling stories. And his wife records them, and he comes in, he will pitch her a new idea every day. And that's one of the things that keeps him going and keeps her going. And I think that's a beautiful expression of a mind of someone that we all have experienced the work of, a guy at the top of his game, embracing this terrifying diagnosis and being brave enough to speak about it, and what it's like to be told you have Alzheimer's when you're at the top of your career, and what do you do next, and how also his creativity is the thing that's keeping him going. So we will have an opportunity to speak with David Milch, which is extraordinary. And then we'll be able to, all of us, talk about how this play brings together, Dr. Bruce Miller and David Milch, and how suddenly we have this common ground. And that to me seems like an extraordinary conversation to have, especially after having watched the play and maybe thought about these things and thought about a little bit about brains and how they work and what they mean, and how creativity is woven into that.
To give you a sense of what UnRavelled is about, it's about, there is a 53-year-old woman. Her name is Dr. Ann Adams, and she is a brilliant biologist. And she's also a pretty crappy painter. And she, with her husband, has been living outside of Vancouver. And their son had a car accident. And when he did, she said, I'm going to stay home and take care of him, because the prognosis was that he would never walk again. So she did. And while this was happening, she, wasn't in the lab anymore. And she said, I'm just going to paint. And she painted a lot of strawberries. She painted one obsessive thing over and over. And her husband was amused and annoyed, and it wasn't a big deal, but she wasn't a painter. So it was like, okay, fine. Then miraculously, the son got better, and he went off to college. And so an unexpected happy ending there. So this is where we pick up the beginning of our story. And in UnRavelled, she says, look, she's playing Scrabble with her husband, and she says, look, I have a bit of an announcement. I'm not going to go back to the lab. And the husband's surprised. Well, why? Why not? It's like, because I want to paint. But you're not a painter. She said, hey, don't you tell me what I can and can't do. And then she has this instinct that she wants to paint. And so it causes some friction in her marriage. And then she starts listening to Ravel's Bolero. And Bolero is a repetitive piece of music. It was written by Maurice Ravel in 1928. And it's not really like anything else he ever made. It's most of what Ravel does is very liquid. It's very impressionistic. He's like Debussy. It flows. And Bolero is very regimented, and it's almost perseverative. It's the same melody repeated X amount of times, exactly without variation, just the orchestration changes. There are people who think of it almost like an etude, or a piece that explores the meaning of what an orchestra can do, rather than a piece of music in and of itself. And yet it is regarded as Ravel's most popular masterpiece. It's played all over the world all the time and has been since it was made. But Ravel hated it. So she becomes obsessed with this music and starts to paint it. And it's a secret. She keeps it a secret. And she's painting and painting and painting. And she makes up this gorgeous painting of it, which is so much better than anything she ever made before. And her husband is surprised and shocked and delighted. And this is like, wow, this is like a whole new person. And then she starts to show the symptoms. And then she starts to lose words. Her personality starts to shift slightly. It gets so bad at one point that she starts picking up the steak knife from the wrong end. She cuts herself. She forgets that she was just in a meeting and comes back again. And she starts to her speech starts to go, but her painting continues to improve. So they take her to see Dr. Bruce Miller, who diagnoses her with primary progressive aphasia. And it's a kind of dementia. And through the course of this, she discovers that Ravel had the same, at 53, Ravel was composed Bolero, which itself is the first symptom of his PPA, which he had, and he, like her, died 7 years later. And they both had the same disease, and they were both inspired by the same piece of music / art at the same point in their disease, which was a radical departure for them in terms of their creativity. And the theme of this is exploring the idea of what disease is, what creativity is, what is it to love somebody when they fundamentally change, where do the boundaries lie? And also share a story of a disease which has inside it a great and beautiful gift at the very beginning phases that teaches us hugely about the balance of the mind, in that at the beginning of this disease, language disappears just a little bit, which allows music and visualizing to come to the fore a bit more. And perhaps language is too prominent. Perhaps we're too focused on that, and that takes away from some of the other things that are necessarily having to take a back seat while language has the front of the stage all the time.
you've really got to come to the conversation on June the 26th, because it's absolutely one-time unique experience of seeing one of the top neurologists in the world in conversation with one of the top TV writers in the world. You know, Dr. Bruce Miller from the Aging and Memory Center in conversation with David Milch, who is the creator of Deadwood. And having access to David Milch in this brave journey he's making of being public about his Alzheimer's diagnosis and how creativity keeps him going. And I just can't think of a better way to round out watching the play than to have a live conversation with these incredible people.
What do I want the audience to get out of this play? What I want with any story I tell, I want the audience to feel what I felt when I first heard it. I want them to be fascinated with the reality of it. I want to share with them the wonder and the beauty of this story and what it means. I want them to have empathy and sympathy for the people who struggle with this. And I want them to see that there is a magic that you never thought was there inside something that seems quite desperate and deadly.
Please come join us on June the 26th for our showing of the play, followed by a live conversation with David Milch and Dr. Bruce Miller. You can find everything you need to know about this, the play, and the live conversation afterwards at unravelledplay.com. That's unraveled with 2 L's play.com.